here we are. It's the Saturday edition of the Writ Race, and I get to take advantage of some of the folks who get up early on the weekends to contribute to the radio show on News Talk 1010. This morning, I caught up with my co-podcaster, Keith Leslie. Now, Keith co-hosts On the Ledge, as you may know. It's the Ontario Politics podcast. He co-hosts with me and John Wright of Maru Public Opinion. This morning, we woke up to news that Ontario Premier Doug Ford has decided to prorogue the provincial legislature. Now, the Ledge will not sit again at Queen's Park until October the 4th. That's 2 weeks after the federal election. So I asked Keith, was he surprised by the move?
It did, actually. I mean, we're 3 weeks into the federal election already. We knew the legislature was supposed to come back September the 13th. And why all of a sudden now the Ford government decided it needed to prorogue and postpone the reassumption of the legislature until October the 4th is a bit of a surprise. I mean, usually what legislatures do during a federal election is they take that day off so that people can go vote and, you know, their campaign workers can go out and help their own people get the vote out, that sort of thing. But to prorogue the legislature simply because of a federal election seems a bit of a dodge to me at this point. I'm not quite sure why they'd want to do it, other than, you know, they've made it really clear they want to stay to that federal election. And as we know, in the 2019 election, you know, Andrew Scheer wouldn't even mention Doug Ford's name. So we're not sure here. I mean, is Doug Ford trying to help out O'Toole by, again, hiding throughout the rest of this campaign? We haven't seen him publicly in a long time, and we had one news conference in 5 weeks. Doug Ford seems to be ducking this out, especially at a time, you know, when, you know, the fourth wave of COVID with the Delta variant, the cases are soaring again. The kids are returning to school in a couple of days. The latest modeling has come out, and, you know, was, again, the modeling was released at 5 o'clock at night. No news conference to explain it or why. We need Premier Ford to come out and start talking about these things. And by not being in the legislature, you know, September 13th, he's absolutely avoiding questions on these key things about Delta, the vaccine passports, and the, you know, the return to school.
Yeah, well, you heard from Paul Calandra yesterday, again, in a written statement, saying the reason that they wanted to do this so that they would have more certainty around their legislation once they knew who was going to be leading the federal government. Well,
I guess that means, you know, I guess they're hoping that if Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives do form the next government, O'Toole's talked about greatly increasing the health transfer to payments to the provinces, much higher than the Liberals are planning to do. So perhaps he's hoping that, you know, that'll help out. Or on the other hand, if the Liberals do get back in, Ontario's going to have to look at, you know, signing one of those $10 a day daycare programs that the Liberals sign with most other provinces. So I guess he could be saying, you know, he wants to wait until the government wants to see which government is going to be handing them what money for what programs before they form their own fall plans. But as I say, it seems a bit of a dodge. They're avoiding accountability in the legislature during the fourth wave of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, the argument will be, as you know well, the government doesn't stop. There's still, you know, the premier's still in charge. We still got the health minister. But to your point, you know, there has been no opportunity to inquire about, you know, whatever, some of the minutia that people are going to be asking just about getting back to school this week.
Absolutely. And, you know, when I complained about the premier having only one news conference in 5 weeks, reporters were still not allowed in the room. And yet the night before, the premier had held an in-person $1,600 a head fundraiser. So why are the rules being laid out this way? You know, is it, again, to avoid accountability? It's really unclear. And there are a lot of questions that the government would absolutely be facing about, you know, as you say, the kids returning to school, the anti-vax protests that are now targeting hospitals. You know, the government needs to be showing some leadership, and we're absolutely not seeing leadership at this point from the Ford government. I mean, when you know, at the beginning of August, the fourth wave wasn't even really here. Look at the cases now, up over 800 cases a day. Hospitalizations are going back up. Alberta's had to reinstitute a bunch of restrictions it vowed never to do. Is Ontario on the road to reintroducing more restrictions? The government needs to become clean, get in the House, and answer these questions.
Yeah, we were just playing the CTV report earlier in the hour from Alberta, and, you know, I mean, to the point where Kenny now is saying, well, I'll give you $100 if you get a shot.
Yeah, and again, they're imposing. Either they showed that clip of Kenny in June saying, no, this is the end. The pandemic's moved to an endemic. We'll never be reimposing these things. And of course, they're absolutely reimposing restrictions. The Edmonton hospitals at 97% capacity. These things are insane. The people want to see their governments out, and they want to see their governments showing leadership on this particular file right now. There's a lot of concern. Again, I speak about the return to school. It's in a few days, and people are really They're expecting cases to go up. The modeling says cases are going to go up, and no one's been out to explain all this to us. The government really should be in the legislature taking questions on this. And I agree with the opposition parties. They're ducking their responsibility by postponing the House until October the 4th.
Keith, great of you to join us. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
So we are now officially wrapping up week number 3, 21 days, give or take, of campaigning, and by all the major parties. And things are starting to kind of settle in terms of where people are going to be in terms of squaring off. We already saw the debate, the TVA debate in Montreal. And by all accounts, there was no winner there. And because Aaron O'Toole didn't lose the way Mr. Scheer did last in 2019, that was viewed as a positive. So there's all this kind of strange calculus that goes on all of this. And now we head into another week that will be, highlighted by more debating. French and English consortium debates will happen this week as well. So I thought it would be important to set the stage for this coming week. And Tom Mulcair joining us. He is the former leader of the federal NDP, leader of the opposition during his tenure in Parliament. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
I'm well, Dave. Great to be with you again.
Good of you to join us. Listen, so, I heard your analysis on with John Moore, and I heard you chatting with Evan Solomon on his show as well, talking about, the outcomes of that first debate. Now, we do the daily podcast with John Wright, and we were talking about this in terms of how important it was to score points in that one, but how important or strategically was it important perhaps to keep some powder dry because there's still more debating to come?
Well said. And I was thinking about that because there is a candidate of the Liberal Party that Mr. Trudeau has refused to get rid of, who has several accusations of sexual misconduct against him. And I'm scratching my head saying, well, there's a perfect opening right now. And then I said, no, nobody in Quebec knows who this guy is. They're going to come up with this in the next debate when they're doing it in English in the rest of Canada. So there is a bit of strategy around that. It was a fascinating debate. I work at TVA, as you might know, on the French side. Mm-hmm. So I was there before, during, and after. And we were like kids at Christmas, right? Because, political commentary, and all of a sudden you've got the first debate and everything's going wild. Trudeau did quite well, but I do think that O'Toole won it on points, just slightly, because he was very poised. Everybody was gobsmacked by this guy. What Emmanuel Latravers, a very senior commentator, said, this Olympian calm that this guy was able to master throughout this thing, because he was attacked on all sides. Of course, Singh had to go after him because he's the horror of the right wing. Trudeau has to try to take this guy down a peg because he's number one with a bullet. And, of course, Blanchette had every reason to want to go after him because Blanchette, the head of the Bloc Québécois, has the most to lose in this, because the way Quebecers go is the minute the wave starts, it's like, once the water comes over the gunnels of your canoe, good luck trying to right the thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens in Quebec. You've seen it, Dave. Mulroney got a massive majority. And then we went to Lucien Bouchard, got such a big majority of seats in Quebec, he actually became the official opposition in Ottawa. And then the NDP, Jack Layton and myself, we built that orange wave in Quebec. And, of course, the Liberals have been back any number of times. So the Quebec voters are incredibly fickle. There's no brand loyalty there. It was safe to park with the Bloc last time around, but Blanchette is terrified as to what could happen because they're watching the polls for the O'Toole in Quebec. He's going up slowly but surely, and if there's a sense that the Conservatives have a chance of forming a government, the 10 seats that the Conservatives now have in Quebec could become 20 or 30 overnight.
So let me just talk about the way the campaigns are stretching out here. I mean, we had Bob Richardson on. I'm sure you've crossed paths with Bob over the years. And we were talking about the Trudeau brand really being a ballot question, whether or not that was hurting. And he said, to some degree it is. And he was critical of certainly of the Liberal campaign. He said it was they're thinking like in Technicolor if they think that they were ever going to get a majority. But when we asked him about the strength of the NDP campaign, he was fairly unvarnished in his assessment of it. And I just want your reaction to what he had to say.
I don't think this is a serious campaign. And I say this with some respect. I like him. He seems like a nice guy. I don't think this has been a serious leader in that Ed Broadbent, Jack Layton, and Tom Mulcair did the work, recruiting candidates, putting the organization in place, doing kind of the gut work that you got to do in politics to get to a point where you can take advantage of stuff. This guy's been doing TikTok videos, and he hasn't been doing the sort of scut work that's required in politics. And I think it started to show.
That's an unvarnished view. What's your reaction, Bob?
I think that Singh's run a really good campaign. Now, there is, of course, a bit of playing to his base, as everybody plays to their own. So if you have so much money that you don't know what to do with it, fear not. Jagmeet Singh knows what he's going to do with your money. But at the same time, he's connected with new Canadians, ethnocultural communities in Toronto who are sometimes fed up with being taken for granted by the Liberals. If you remember, after that tragic, horrible Islamophobic murder in London, Ontario, when every leader was there, Ford was there, Trudeau was there, the person who got the best reception was Jagmeet Singh. He knows how to share that experience. He knows what it's like to be, capable and have the best education, but still feel left out. So he's connecting with a lot of people on that level. His biggest problem now, going back to the quote we just listened to, is the same problem that Ed Broadbent had. It's the same problem that I had. How do you hold on to your vote? Mm-hmm. That's his big challenge right now, because the Liberals are going to be gunning in the GTA, not for Aaron O'Toole. They're gunning for Jagmeet Singh's votes, because their siren song goes something like this. Yes, we failed on climate change. We promised to get it done, and we didn't. Yes, we promised democratic reform, and it was a big promise on the left, and we're so sorry. We tore up the report when we knew it would hurt the Liberals. But you can't vote for the NDP this time. You have to vote for Justin again, because otherwise those horrible Conservatives are going to get in. That's the song. And it works. I mean, you can see the NDP's numbers starting to soften in the GTA, because even though I'm talking to you from Quebec, I readily make the simple acknowledgement that this election is going to be decided not just in Ontario, but specifically in the Greater Toronto Area. Those 50 seats are going to determine who gets to win. I think we're still looking at a minority on either side, whether it's Liberal or Conservative, but they're the only two that are in any position to form a government.
Nick Nanos qualifying O'Toole as, quote, a political freight train, and that was based on his assessment of the latest poll tracking. And Nick's in the field every day. So and let's just be clear.
Fantastic job, because all the numbers from the other polling companies, including the one that we get a lot of in Quebec, Leger is mirroring everything that Nanos has got right now. A good 5-point lead for the Conservatives over the Liberals, and of course that's got to have the Liberals terrified. So you can expect the same Justin Trudeau to show up for the English debate, Dave. He's going to be full of energy. He's going to talk over the other people who are there, which is actually quite annoying, and it's also a sense of entitlement. Why would you want to listen to anybody else if Justin's here? And he's going to have to be careful how he plays it, because he overplayed that hand in the French debate. And O'Toole came away looking more prime ministerial. And look, of all the surprises, Dave, who would have thought, one, that the Conservatives would be 5 points ahead, two, that Aaron O'Toole would be outpolling Justin Trudeau as preferred prime minister. And yet that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and again, the caveat in all of this, and you will know better than anybody, that those polls are a snapshot of when the question was asked a day or two ago. So how this plays out will be important and inform the strategy, right?
Absolutely, because there could be a tumble. There could be a gaffe during the debates. The people, there are certain media in Toronto and across Canada that are favorable to the Conservatives or to the Liberals. They're going to put everything on the line. They're going to do, no matter what happens, they're going to come out saying that Trudeau was amazing and how could we even consider having O'Toole. But this has caught everybody off guard. They've had such a well-planned, disciplined campaign that in and of itself is a calling card. Because you can stand there and say, we're ready to form government. But if you don't feel that these guys are really well-structured and organized, it doesn't pass muster. But O'Toole comes across as a guy who's singularly disciplined personally, that maybe those years and years in the military helped. He's stuck to his script. He's had some tough questions, like this whole thing about daycare in Quebec is a big mess for him. It would have been super easy for him to pull a 180, but he didn't. He stuck to his guns. Trudeau has a couple of winning cards. One of them is daycare. The other is vaccine. It's a bit unfair, but it is the politics of division. It's wedge politics, and he's trying to stick O'Toole with the anti-vaxxers. And, everything's fair in love and politics. But we'll see if he can actually pull that off during the debates this week. You talked about the debates as being important. This week, they're crucial.
Well, we'll watch it with interest. Tom Mulcair, thanks for joining us. It's great to have your perspective on this.
All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that'll do it for this Saturday edition of The Writ Race. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, by the way, on Apple or Google. Otherwise, you can follow the show on Spotify. Do leave us a rating and a comment. Good, bad, otherwise. We're just grateful that you've included us in your listening routine and appreciate all the feedback. I'm Dave Trafford, and The Writ Race is an Eye Contact podcast.